Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed. With me, I have the amazing co-host of my right-hand man. We got here Jeff Dickinson, the president and CEO of RGTX Logistics Solutions. You ready for today, brother?
I am. I'm ready for today, man. Whenever you're ready to go, let's do this.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Let's get right to it. So, Jeff, today we have a special guest for you. We have the Vice President of Sales at 12 Point Logistics, the current SHW champion. And in his senior year at the Chattanooga Mocs football team, he posted 35 tackles and 2 interceptions as a linebacker. And currently, finally, the host of the CWG podcast, the People's Captain. And even though we have so many accolades that we just kind of named, I'm pretty sure his favorite is being the father of Marcus, and he does have a child on the way as well. We've got the man, the people's captain, Gunnar Miller.
What's up, brother? Hey, man, quick question. So a lot of people carry these belts around, right, in brokerages. You see it all over the country. You see people with the phone call warrior, the I made this many outbound calls warrior, the I booked this much freight because somebody had a good customer warrior, all this type stuff, right? But nobody has like an actual belt that they actually won with blood, sweat, and tears. But this vice president does. So for all you fake chimps out there in the brokerage space, just want to let you know you own the right podcast. You own the podcast to learn something. You own the podcast to get something across. But you're here with the people's captain. You're here with Ryan Muhammad. You're here with the cowboy. You're here with Jeff Dickinson. This is going to be fun. Let's get 30. Let's get this thing going, bro.
Yeah, let's do this, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's pretty awesome. So, let's dig right into it. Jeff, you guys kind of want to mention to talk about his next part.
Yeah, man. So, Gunnar, man, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. I know you definitely are busy with so many different things. I'm really curious. How did you get into the industry, my friend?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I fell into it on accident, just like so many people did, I believe. I played football at UTC, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Played for 4 years. When I got out, I was getting recruited by the WWE for professional wrestling. Didn't necessarily know what I was going to do, but there was all these articles out in town in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is the smallest big city you can be across when it comes to putting newspapers and articles out. Everybody knows who you are, right? So these articles are out about me getting recruited and going to have a tryout in June. So trying to get a job, I graduated in December 2013. My tryout was June 2014. Trying to get a real job between January and June was damn near impossible, man. So people just didn't want to invest money in me, to train me, to let me go in June if I was to make it, because they kept asking if I would leave if I would. And I said, well, of course I would. What would you want to be when you were 6 years old? I wanted to be a pro wrestler. If I get the opportunity to do it, I'm going to do it. So they didn't like that answer. But Johnny Jones from Lipsy Logistics gave me an opportunity. I went to go see a couple of buddies of mine that played football with me at UTC. They happened to work there. I didn't know Johnny even was the president there. I walked in. He was pretty much, long story short, he's like, hey, man, you want a job? I was like, I got a tryout in June, WWE next week. He goes, when you come back, you got a job. If you need time off to wrestle, you got it. As long as you work here, treat it almost like an internship, a sponsorship, or whatever. You work for me, you learn logistics, and I'll let you go do your wrestling thing. And he stuck to that for 6 years, man. I was there till February of 2020, and whenever I needed time off, nobody even questioned it. That I was usually gone on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But I also, when it was hurricane season and stuff, I stayed my butt in the seat, and I worked 75 days in a row, 18-hour days for him too. So, if he's loyal to me, I'll be loyal to him. And that's the way I operate. And then that's how I got into freight, man. And then in February 2022, I got the opportunity to come over to 12 Point, a startup, 4 people there, man, back into a garage with a coffee table and old chairs and folding chairs, literally like a wrestling show. And landed a couple of good accounts. And here we are, a couple years later, and we've got a $20 million company. And I've been fortunate enough to work my way up in sales we actually hit 20 million this year for the first time. So that's a pretty big deal for us. So, but 15 employees, we're doing really well. Great leadership with Jake and Jordan. So it's a great place to be, man. We got good people that want to work for us. And that's how I got into logistics. So that's where we're at. And we're just trying to put our head down and see what we can do in 2023. And for me, marketing is a huge part of that. So I'm sure we want to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Why don't we just get into that? Talk about marketing and branding of your business. and how that's going.
Yeah, so about a year ago, I went to, well, February of 2022, I went to the Grant Cardone 3-day business boot camp. And I'm a big guy on listening to Gary Vee and all these social media guys about content, content, content. And I was like, I don't know. Then you go down there and you hear Grant talk, and he literally says, if you want to get known right now, go to YouTube stories. And this was right before YouTube stories blew up. And he was showing analytics on his data from YouTube stories where his channel, which, I mean, Grant Cardone, right? He's a big name in the sales space, but Grant Cardone, his channel wasn't even at 1 million followers until he really started like, or right at 1 million, until he really started hammering YouTube stories. And then it just exploded. Like, that's what YouTube was pushing at the moment. It was just very organic and real. So I started doing those with my podcast and noticed I was getting like thousands of views when the podcast was getting like hundreds of views. So I was like, okay, that's a little weird. So I guess it was probably around the end of spring, we hired our next group of sales guys. And around that time, I was like, I've got to go all in on marketing. I'm going to let them do our selling, and I'm going to do our marketing. So I had my YouTube channel. I had my podcast platform that I had already built up for myself. And I said, how can I leverage that with 12 Point? So let's slap the 12 Point Logistics logo on there. Let's slap my logo on there. And let's use my podcast, which was mainly sports themed and like just people I knew in Chattanooga, chat with Gunner, play on words, Chattanooga with Gunner, trying to be the Joe Rogan of Chattanooga. But instead of bringing people in studio, let's just do webcam. Let's talk to anybody in the country, and let's talk to everybody in logistics and sales that we possibly can, and provide as much value as we can to the people within my community. At that time, was about 2,000 people on LinkedIn. And now at the end of this week, I mean, at any given moment now, we're going to cross 8,000 followers just on my page. And, that's a bunch of views that's seen 12 Point Logistics. That's a bunch of views that's seen my face. And my face gets associated with 12 Point. It's much more than that. Like 12 Point is such a deeper brand of people that make this thing really work. I know I am the face probably, and that might not be fair, but I'm just trying to help get my brand out. If I can grow my personal brand, I can grow our company brand. That's the way I think about it, and I think everybody's on board.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Now, when you go and you interview all these other different people, how does that impact 12 Point? I mean, you're talking to different people in the industry and logistics and sales. I mean, across the board, if you will, right? So what was the main goal from that marketing point of view of what you wanted to do, and how did it impact the performance of 12 Point?
That's the best question I've been asked on a podcast yet, Jeff. I swear I've been waiting for something like this. So the reason I did it was because Jake and Jordan and myself, we all got into logistics around the same time, right around 2014. Jordan might have worked another 12 months or so prior. He was a cop before that, right? They were both cops. So we don't have somebody that we can go to that has 20 years of experience that we can get knowledge from their failures, from their successes, to be able to pick their brain. We can text them, right? We can text them, and maybe those people don't give us all the right information or anything because it's a text. And sometimes with a text, it's like, yeah, man, if I really like you, I'll text you and I'll give you information. But if you put somebody on a platform, a podcast that's live out there for LinkedIn, they're going to be a little bit more energetic. They're going to give you a little bit more because they're trying to act like they know some things for people that are watching, right? So I was like, how many people can I talk to in logistics through webcam so that I can gain experience, gain knowledge, gain the information that I would grab from a 20-year vet, but just grab it from all walks of life in logistics, whether it's a shipper, whether it's a broker, whether it's a driver, whether it's an asset trucking company, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a CSR, whether it's a marketer, whoever it is. I don't care if you're making $30,000 at a company or if you're making millions of dollars at a company. I want to hear every perspective so that I can understand everything that's going on in the freight game, which is what I call it, keeping it very sports themed. So that was my goal. And I just try to pass everything I learned, every tidbit of information I get. I literally walk into the office and I'm like, hey man, I just talked to so-and-so and this is what he said. And I give them the information. They don't got to watch my podcast to get the information that I'm trying to get, because I'm trying to extract very minimal information out of certain individuals and then passing that along to my team. And then all the other fluff is good for the audience. So it's win-win for both sides.
Gotcha. Now, when you think about other competitors, right, and it's either an eat or be eaten type of game, right? I think we can all agree upon that, right? If you're not first, you're last. So when you think about that, does that open up you for criticism for not knowing that? Because what I'm hearing is that you're learning from others and you're taking little bits and pieces and you're creating your own way of doing things. So how does that come across to others? I'm just curious on that.
No, I mean, devil's advocate. I love it. So when you put yourself out there on a public forum and you're exposing maybe some weaknesses, right? That's what we're talking about. Exposing some weaknesses. People can smell the blood in the water and they can attack that. Oh, Gunnar don't even know this. Why would you work with him, right? Okay. Well, what do you not know? Because there's something you
Right.
don't know that you're not telling somebody, that you're pretending to know, and you're giving the people just a fluffy answer, and you're just trying to sell them, right? You're being the master BSer and just doing the right thing. There's so much of that goes on in the space, in sales anywhere, right? You know when you run across a good car salesman, and you know when you run across a BSer. Like it is what it is. Like you can know within 5 minutes whether somebody's been in the industry for 2 years or 10 years. It's just very easy to tell.
Right.
So I would say if people think that me putting myself out there might be a weakness, that's their thought. That's their opinion. That's something they got to worry about. It literally doesn't even cross my mind. Like I've been like that my entire life. If
Good.
I don't know something, I'm going to ask questions. I'm the best question asker ever, because no question's a dumb question for me, because I ask the dumbest questions of all time, but I get the answers I need.
Well, it's
Yeah,
perfect that
I
you said
mean,
that.
that's the way that we all learn. I mean, from street smarts of myself and asking those critical questions and just moving up that ladder and getting to get that knowledge of every little bit and pieces of the supply chain is so critical, because now you're forming great knowledge. And if you're not reading every day and you got your finger on the pulse, you're going to be left behind. So I'm glad that you're doing that, man. That's a really good approach to learning. So keep on doing that, for my friend, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you.
And it's awesome to kind of think about too. And even with like your branding, Gunner, one thing I've noticed, and I'm doing my research on my own too, is that you're you're not making posts and saying, "Hey, it's 12 point," or anything like that. Even I don't even think I've seen like a logistics post from you. I think it's more of like, "Hey, your personal branding," and that's what I really respect. So, can you speak a little bit more? Because obviously, it would be intentional. The difference in, hey, you having a more human approach, hey, posting about Tom Brady or your favorite person, your favorite quarterback, and like with your family and things like that, versus like, hey, I'm a logistics broker. I can do this, I can do that. Where's the difference for you there?
Okay, I've talked to so many shippers through cold calls or follow-ups or relationships that we've built with customers. They understand that every broker knows how to do everything another broker does. The difference between brokerages is not the broker. The difference between brokerages is the technology at this point. So if you're at a brokerage that has a lot of great technology, you're going to stand out. If you're at a brokerage that has an asset-based company tied to it with thousands of trucks, you're going to stand out. You're going to sell better. Now, if you're just a solo show, you're probably going to go after those small to medium-sized companies, and you're going to be their all-in guy, their number one solution. Look at John Rogers, that's on LinkedIn. I mean, that guy is absolutely crushing it. I had a 2-hour conversation with him the other week, and I'm about to do a podcast with him, but that's his strategy, right? He's like, I'm going to go be their relationship. I'm not going to go be their broker. So he takes a whole different approach to it. But for me, my whole thing is everybody knows what a broker does. So I don't got to sit up here and tell you what a broker does. It's been said 1,000 different ways, 100 different times. So I'm going to tell you who I am. And if I'm somebody that you might want to work with, then we can talk about brokering. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about sales on LinkedIn. I'll talk about branding and what's important in logistics, but I'll definitely give more gunner posts on LinkedIn, more so than I'll give industry post, because there's people
Right.
out there that can do that. There's reporters, there's freight waves, there's people for that. I don't need to be the YouTuber that commentates on CNN or Fox News. I ain't gonna be that guy, but I'll give you what's happening at 12 point. I'll give you what's happening in my world. And if we can work together, perfect. If not, hey, that's cool too. There's a lot of shippers that I'm friends with on LinkedIn that we don't move any of their freight, but they're cool
Mhm.
people. Just because I'm not
Yeah.
just going to beg them for freight. Now, one of these days they might go, I might see them post something, be like, "Hey, man, I saw you post this. I do this. We're actually really strong in this lane. I'm not going to BS you. Like, this is one of our strong points. Would you want us to take a look at it?" Something like that, like a soft sell per se. But I'm more
Yep.
about building relationships. I feel like if you build a relationship now, you might get their freight 5 years from now and not even realize that they even had freight. So that's my play, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because you're looking for congruency, basically. It doesn't have to be on a business level. It has to, it mostly is about the personal side of the business.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of really good long-term business relationships are formed and forged directly from that. I think it's a great approach for doing that for sure.
That's amazing.
Well,
I love it personally.
there's been times like, like at this point, like I'll just be straight up, like 12 Point is not your number one drayage broker, right? We're not the team. No, we're not the team to come to for drayage, but we've moved Dre because I've built relationships on LinkedIn with guys that do Dre that are willing to help. So we get Dre quotes. I reach out to the guys that I've met on LinkedIn. And I say, hey man, I got this Dre quote. Definitely not my alley. You quote us this Dre stuff, and if you can move it, we'll co-broker it or whatever we need to do. We'll give you the customer, but if we get some truckload stuff, let us get the truckload stuff. So I'm not afraid to reach out and share customers and share market share, especially like if we're good at truckload and they're good at Dre, why would we not work together on that? Like it's perfect scenario. I don't understand if more of these brokerages would just work together. A lot more freight would get moved for a lot better prices. The problem is everybody wants to compete with everybody. Nobody wants to share, and they want to sue everybody about non-solicits and non-competes, and nothing's ever going to get done.
That's awesome to think about. It's that collaboration that you have, and I would assume obviously that came from like your football career and as well as like your wrestling career as well. But I kind of want to ask you about branding, personal branding, because one thing I kind of read, Gunner, is like personal branding is not about becoming famous. It's about being famous to selectively, like to certain people and to certain audiences, and how you build it. And it's about who needs to know you to reach your goals. So I what I've loved about your posts, and you make them daily and things like that, and people are communicating with you, and there's always going to be that one person who you've never thought about or ever heard about is who's going to engage with you. What are some things that need to be done before you even talk about a personal brand?
Yeah. So me and Brent were talking about this yesterday, and he was very adamant about this, and I was like, yeah, I got to agree with you. I never thought about it because I guess I'd kind of already done it before. I was doing what he was asking. So he's not a fan of people that try to start creating a personal brand without having any proven results. And I'm with him on that to a certain regard. Like there's a lot of fakeness out there. If you go like, especially now on LinkedIn, if you go back to Instagram and stuff, people are renting Ferraris, renting big houses and taking pictures, and then they're done with it and they go back to their, 300 square foot bedroom. Now, if you look in logistics, there's probably people talking about, I've done this in sales, that in sales, this in sales. I've moved this many loads. We've done this as a company. The past 2 years has been inflated. So what are you going to do this year? What'd you do in 2019? But another thing you got to look at is, don't tell somebody the secrets to getting a $10 million account if you haven't ever hit a $10 million account yourself. Now, if you have, now you have a little bit of leverage to back on. That's why I like to post all of my personal branding stuff with my impressions and with my numbers, so that people understand, like, I'm not just saying this and I'm at the very beginning of my journey. I did that then too, but I also told everybody at the beginning of my journey. But then when I finally hit 1 million impressions or whatever it is, and that's not a lot for a lot of people on LinkedIn that have been grinding on it for 5 years, but that was the first time I had hit it because I'd been consistent with it. I'd had big days, but I'd never been consistent enough to hit that. So when I hit it, I'm like, oh, that's easy. Well, now I'm already on track to probably do like 3 or 5 million this year, just based off of the daily numbers. So, and just letting people see that organic growth and letting them know that this is, something that they can do as well. You just have to do it. And people want to hear your voice, but what do they want to hear you talk about? It's figuring that out, but in order to figure that out, you got to throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and figure out what people want to hear from you.
Yeah, and keep moving forward. Keep moving forward.
I mean, because I've done 159 podcasts. That's over 159 hours of talking. Some of them are 3 hours, some of them are 2, some of them are an hour. I've done a bunch of guest shows. I've done a bunch of media appearances for football and radio and stuff like that. So like my voice is out there a lot. And I kind of have a good idea of what people like me to talk about. So I guess it took a long time for me to say, an overnight success per se, but not really.
And there's one thing you said just now that really hit home with us, because you said, like, the market, everyone could sell within the last 2 years. Like, what have you done previously and what are you going to do? And we had Jeb Blunt on last week, and he was talking about selling in a crisis, about like, you kind of got to get back to the basis and being as a sales leader. For you, when it comes to your brand, like you said, you're authentic with yourself. You kind of put everything, make it stick and things like that. And what happens from there? As a leader, yourself, what are the conversations with your sales reps on your team about personal branding?
Yeah, so I talked to them about this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, guys, I really want you guys to focus on LinkedIn. There's a guy in the automotive space that's starting to branch out into all sales. His name is Andy Elliott. I don't know if you guys follow him or not. He's out of Scottsdale. I went to one of his boot camps over the summer, and a little bit different than Grant Cardone's. He's very personal. Like, he called me, he asked me to come out. It was sold out. He pulled me off to the side. He let me get up on stage and tell my story. Like, he's a really cool dude. But he runs his team like a sales team, like a college team. Like, they get up and work out. They're all in good shape. Like, they're family, church together. Like, they operate like a legit college sports team. But what he does is he makes his team, at least for 1 hour a day, quit doing whatever they're doing. They're no longer allowed to sell. They can only focus on social media, and they're to make videos and to create content and to post it out and everything. Now, they utilize all the social medias, but for me and my team, I take that same strategy. I'm like, guys, let's start doing that on LinkedIn. And, I know they started connecting with more people, but it's scary to create content. And, a lot of companies don't want you to create content, or they want to approve it first. I've dealt with some people like that so far. I got to get approved through compliance to even get them on my show. But, I feel like once you give them the freedom, hey, man, go be you. I want you to be unapologetically, authentically you every single time you post something. And if it's an issue, I'll deal with it. But, I want you to be you because you're my people. And I think if they do that, they will have success. But it's not easy to push somebody to do that. And I'm not forcing it on them. I'm not saying, hey, you have to do this. I'm advising them to do that. But we'll see. One of them's doing it a little bit better right now. He's already like tripled his connections and followers just in the past couple of weeks, because, like you guys probably know, you get 100 a week. Why are we not connecting with 100 people a week? Like, everyone should be connecting with 100 people a week. If you're not, it's just pure laziness. And I was in that slump for years. So now that I'm doing it, it works. You get followers on top of that. Like, it's crazy. It's so simple, but people just don't want to take the time to do it.
Right.
Love that.
Right.
Jeff, it's something too, and the kind of like a follow-up question to that as well for you, Gunnar, is that how do you have that conversation with your team of like, hey, because it's a numbers game, right? And like, how, like, let's say they're not hitting their numbers, or they're not kind of seeing the growth, the organic growth that they want to see, how they can not get like that dopamine drip of like, hey, somebody's kind of like deleted me or said something wrong to me. How do you kind of factor those conversations with them?
Man, it's tough. I just give them experiences on pro wrestling, man, because you got to realize I learned all this through wrestling, through Twitter. Twitter was LinkedIn for the internet wrestling community, and you had to play the game. If you wanted to get good bookings, there were certain fans that you had to kind of play towards, because you knew that fan was a mark and he had the promoter's ear. And that's just the game, man. So you had to play that. And when I got hurt, I blew my knee out in 2018, but I was on like the peak of my rise. I had just won 2017 Georgia Wrestler of the Year. I'd just beaten Matt Riddle. My name was getting out there. I was about to wrestle Jeff Cobb in a 3-day weekend. I was about to win 2 belts and win a tournament in a 3-day weekend. And I blew my knee out the weekend before that when I just turned babyface. So that was frustrating, but I had a lot of downtime. For the first time in my life, had nothing to do on the weekends. There was no baseball. Played baseball my whole life growing up, slate baseball. There was no college football. We always had meetings on the weekend. And there was no wrestling. I always wrestled on the weekend. So it was the first time I didn't have anything to do. So I guess I was depressed, but I didn't even know what depression was. And then I was on Twitter, and I just decided to say the things that I really wanted to say in the locker room that everybody else was talking about, but nobody else would say online because everybody was scared to say it.
Yeah.
And then you realize how big of a voice you really have and how many people actually heard you. Because the next thing I know, I'm trending on Twitter. The hashtag is "Who is Gunnar Miller?" I'm in every wrestling news site, every wrestling front page, because of one comment I made about a little guy getting signed. And then I realized, oh, okay, so they'll just turn on you like that at the drop of a dime. It doesn't matter. They were following me. They were hoping that I got signed so that they could ride me to WrestleMania. That it wasn't the other way around. And then I realized, okay, people are using me, so I ain't gonna worry about people anymore. I'm gonna worry about myself. So I'm gonna find people that want to deal with me, and that's what I did. And I took that over to LinkedIn. So I've got all this stuff where I've got all this hate, and I've got thick skin. It doesn't bother me, right? I share those stories with my guys and say, listen, you think this is bad? Somebody said you don't know what you're talking about in sales on LinkedIn. Dude, I was trending on Twitter worldwide. Who is Gunnar Miller, with people dogging me when I know I'm not that type of person. So, it's just, don't worry about what other people say. Just worry about what you do and who you are, and that's all that matters.
BU.
That's right. BU.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Wrestling or logistics? You only can choose one.
So right now I'd choose logistics. I tell everybody when I originally started in logistics, I didn't know what it was. I thought detention meant that somebody got in trouble the first time I heard it from a truck driver. So I'm like, I was like, hey man, this guy over here, he's in detention. I think we need to get him out. But anyways, so that was plan A. When I started in logistics was plan B. It took me 6 years to really learn what logistics could be and what it was, when it really should have probably took 2. Like most people, it probably takes 2 years to really kind of get a grasp, 3 to where they can understand, start making some money. John Rogers, a year. But for me, it took 6 because I slow played it. I wasn't there. I didn't really care, that type of thing. But I learned because I was doing great freight with really big customers and led by a great team that had a lot of experience. So I learned a lot. I call it logistics college, almost like getting my GA. But yeah, man. So logistics. If I was to go into wrestling, I'd take a pay cut, and I'm not at a pay cut phase of my life, because if you was to get signed, you'd have to go to NXT, and if you go to NXT, you're probably, I'm not where I would want to be at NXT, and then you're still on the road. But the one thing you would get is you'd get the WWE brand to attach yourself to even grow your personal brand anymore. And I'm not going to go into too many details, but you could be like one of the wrestlers here recently just got kicked off the show because she's making more money on other websites than she is as a wrestler.
Yep.
Right. What do you dislike about logistics?
That's a great question too. I would say I don't dislike logistics as a whole. I think the industry could be ran better, but there's so much competition and so many sharks that it'll never be ran as efficient as it should. Which is good because we don't need a monopoly. It's good to have a bunch of different people in play.
Absolutely.
But at different brokerages, I would say one thing that I dislike about logistics, and this could be different companies per se, is sometimes lack of transparency in whether it is commission structure, pay, because we know that some of these customers on some of the projects pay a lot better than they would on others. And I think that money just kind of goes somewhere. I don't know where it might go, but I feel like people at the top are playing puppet master sometimes. So I'd say transparency in what actual goals, expectations, systems, and processes is. I feel like a lot of companies are just kind of like, let's just hire 5 people that know logistics and let's do logistics, but there's no structure to it or anything. So maybe nothing that I dislike about logistics, more so what I dislike about how individual companies are ran. And I'm not talking about ours per se or places that I've been, even though there's some examples in both of those, right? Because nobody's perfect. But just seeing as afar, these big brokers, I don't like the way they operate very much, buying freight when the market dies just because they have the money to do so. And taking money off the plate of the smaller businesses that really need it and that could probably service it better. They would just buy a whole contract out and then fail the freight, and then you end up getting it anyways, but it just creates a more mess for the shipper. So there's some strategies that maybe I don't like, but I think logistics is great, man. I think if you're my favorite people for logistics, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think former truck drivers are great for it, especially if they're getting into the office work side of it because they know the game, they're in the trenches. But athletes and military, I think athletes and military are fantastic for logistics, and even better, military women. My fiance, she's upstairs right now. She's working in it, dude. She kicks my ass in logistics. So I'll keep that stuff. I can do the selling and stuff, but dude, as an operator, she's a beast. So she's organized, structured, and she knows what she's doing, and she's very forceful. So but it's that Marine in her, So that's those people. Those are bosses. And you look them up. See those military women that are in the game. None of them are doing bad. They're all doing well. So that's the ballers.
Yeah. Structure is fantastic. Definitely all the way. I'd have to agree with you on that. I mean, I work for Snyder, and Snyder National is a very structured military type operation, and it taught me a tremendous amount. So I cannot agree with you more, Gunnar, on that.
Yeah.
That you must have structure in a business in order to move the peanut forward, and you have to be precise, and you have to have a lot of precision, And it seems like you definitely do. What is your niche? Let everybody know what your niche. It's time for you to promote yourself. Go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're talking logistics, the second day of the job, like I said, I started sales in February 2020. Second day on the job, um, I'll tell you my sales strategy niche, and it's email blasting, and it's
Nice.
more simple than anybody would even think. I
Yep.
promise you, I can generate more inbound responses from emails with less than 2 sentences. And most of these people are over here putting together 5-paragraph essays about what their company can't do, even though they're saying they can do it. And they're not getting no response because that's a typical sales pitch. My email, literally, it's actually a sentence. That's my email blast. Anyways, so it'll generate the responses. And then what I do at this point is I pass those off to my sales guys. So as soon as I get the inbound lead, whether it's an out of office and they give their information, or whether it's a response saying, hey, man, we don't want to deal with you. Or sometimes it's as simple as, hey, we just need your W-9, your COI. Like they just tell you what you need to get set up. But I pass that off to my sales team and they handle it. But when I was doing it, I got in with another freight forwarder. I worked out a deal to become like a partner, a co-broker on the deal, because we also have our asset-based side as well. But it was in written form that we were also going to broker as well, and they didn't care. But they have the business of the largest plastic pipe distributor in the country, and also
Nice.
the largest recycled waste. I guess they buy the most recycled waste for the plastic. So there's a bunch of truckloads going out, and they have 3 phases of it. They have the open deck side, they have the truckload side, and then they have the outbound customer side. So what we became was the largest provider of the truckload side of their business. And for the past 2 years, we've ran over 5,000 loads with them. And they've been a large, significant chunk of our truckload volume. If you look for a $20 million company, just for reference, the first year I was there, they did, and got there in February, so 9 months. The first year I was there, we did about 3 million with them, and then the second year I was there, we did about 11 million with them. And then with things slacking off a little bit this past year, we still are going to do, right around 7-8 million with them. But our focus this year was going into other markets and making that not such a large percentage of our market of our business, because it was like 60% of our business. So we bumped it down to where it was like 30% of our business, with 2 other customers being 30%, and then fluffed in with the rest. And now we've actually got that account down, just through some issues that are going on, and they're making some switches. It's actually down a little bit, just to be completely transparent. But our other accounts are keeping us ahead. Like, we're still growing, we're still doing well. So it'll be interesting to see what 2023 does. Especially as because you notice this, like, you have a great relationship with the forwarder, right? But then they ultimately have the customer. That's the only risk you take when you do that.
Yeah.
And when they have the relationship with the customer, and the customer says, hey, we no longer care about service because we've gotten our ass kicked for the past 3 years. We only care about price. So now they're going more to like a spot board, even though they contracted us like $4 million worth of business. They're going back on the relationship there and the promise, which is cool. Listen, I'm all about saving money and people doing what you got to do. What you got to do. I get that.
Right.
So, but when you do that, a little bit more transparency would work. And I guess that's what I would say about logistics. Like, everybody's cool as long as the market's staying the same. But as soon as the market flips in any certain way, everybody's trying to cut everybody's throat. So even when you have a great relationship with somebody, so it's finding that steady business that's not going to kill you year round. And for my sales guys, it's the flatbed market. So what they've been going in, if you said what our niche is, the flatbed, when most people say it's going to go down in November and December, typically, January, and then kind of come back in the spring, ours went up because they were building those relationships. And it was mainly like equipment companies, I would say, is one of our niches, that they really go after and do a really good job of moving their freight and building those relationships. Because oftentimes what you'll notice is you have to go to each individual branch in order to develop those relationships. So it takes time to do that. But once you do it, you're the number one guy they call. So a couple of our reps have done that really well, and they're just good account managers. So, if anything, I'd say our niche is customer service, and just doing what we're saying we're going to do, and just trying to provide that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's it's something I believe in strongly, is the term clients for life, because it's so much easier to keep a client on board than trying to find a replacement client where you're going to lose tons and tons of money. And just think about all the training that your sales guys have done and all of this. It's a waste. If if you're not servicing your current clients the way that is, because in a lot of cases, those current clients is actually bringing more revenue than the new ones because you're fostering that relationship. You're building it. You just said it yourself. You go from 3 to 5 to 10 million, one customer, so you're doing the right things and you're not working really hard. You're working smart on those clients, and it puts more money back in your pocket for sure, and theirs as well. So it's a great approach.
Yeah, and it worked for us, especially to get us, I'd say, the foundational years. I mean, if you look at a small business, if you can get out of year one, that's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They brought me on in year two, so if you can grow year over year for the next 3 years, even better. But now going into this, this fifth season per se, like this really make or break a company. Like, are you at the same? Do you go back a little bit, or do you go forward? I think that's still to be. I'm not one of the guys to be like, we're going to grow another 15%. No, I'm realistic. It's like, I think a win this year is if we can stay within 1 million of what we did last year, either way.
Right.
And then all the work that we put into this year should show us dividends in the following year. Like if we grind hard in sales this year and building relationships and building accounts, those should explode in 2024. Maybe not 2023. So I think 2023 is the year of nurturing, the year of going out and hunting for some customers and really having the operations team or whoever's doing it really provide great service. Because I do know this. I've been in it long enough to figure this out. And Jeff, I know you'll take my back on this. In a year of service, this is going to be the year of service. If you do not provide the right service, you will not get the freight the next year. Doesn't matter what your relationship was, how long you've been doing business with them, whatever, what the money is. If you don't pick up the freight on time and deliver the freight on time and communicate with these people and let them know what's going on with their freight, somebody will, and they will do it for cheaper during this market, and they will take your freight next year. So I would just make sure that everybody's really zoning in on service this year for their shippers.
Yes, sir. I could not agree with you more on that. And you just have to tell them and be very transparent. You mentioned it many, many times that, if you see things, let them know. It's so much better to let them know instead of them telling you what happened, right? You don't want that to happen. So, I mean,
Right.
Going into the winter months, there's a lot of disruptions, road closures, etc. You've got to start looking at all the maps and where everything is and telling them what's happening on the road, especially if you know your lane. And you can't use the published transit times on that because they're null and void. They're gone, especially around this season. So, the more you're transparent, if you're going to fail, tell them you're going to fail. It's okay to say that. Don't try to hide it and bullshit them and tell them stuff that's not true, because once you're caught with your pants down around your ankles, you're done. You're finished. As hard as it may be to tell them the truth, tell them the truth. They really do want to hear it, for sure.
Yeah, I say no news is bad news and bad news is good news. You just got to let them know what's going on.
Correct.
Well, they said that. And, as we're kind of going to be wrapping up this episode, I know I saw your post this morning, Gunner, about people taking this week. Very quickly, what are 3 habits that every sales rep, every logistics professional should have for next year?
Oh, wow. That's great. Well, I mean, we'll keep it basic and simple. I'd say one habit you need to have is I would take at least an hour a day. Because listen, I know how people work. They don't work focused. That's me too. So take at least an hour a day. I call them power hours, and get something done. Whether that is making cold calls, whether that is prospecting, whether that is sending out LinkedIn, whether that is sending email blasts, whatever. Because you can get a lot done in 1 hour. So I would say really focus on incorporating a power hour in your daily work. Another thing that I would do is I would have some sort of action goal, whether that is, calls, LinkedIn, emails, something, a touch goal, like how many touches did you make a day? And I would try to have an amount to where I would want to know how many times you fail more so than how many times you're successful, because the more you fail, the more successful you will be. And then another goal I would have would be to set, or a habit what I would have would be to set daily goals and to keep them. So when I say that, have like 3 things that you need to get done every day and make sure you do them. But if you don't, just add it to the next day. Don't do it. I think a lot of times people write down a daily goal and they get 2 done. They don't do the third. that the third just kind of disappears and it just kind of floats over here in the I'll do it later space. So I would say, have some goals, some daily goals, mark those goals, make sure that you get them done. Obviously doing your actions. So that would be important. So, but you kind of caught me with my pants down on that one. I'm gonna think about that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's why we go. We're not scripted. We don't send you a list of questions
No,
before.
No, it's fine.
I
love it.
We're definitely ad hoc for sure.
We're absolutely
No,
ad
I
hoc.
love that. But I'm gonna think about that now, and then I might tag you guys in a post later and do a little follow up on that as well. So because that was a great question. That it's good to have those goals because everybody's different, right? In this space, you've got like, what's a person going to do that's cradle to grave that a person is going to do the split model that might be a little bit different. Like, so when you're talking to logistics as a whole, you kind of have to specify, am I talking to a guy that's a one-man shop, or am I talking to a guy that just has to sell? Because now if I'm talking to a person that's a one-man shop, well, now I'm probably, one of my habits is probably I'm focusing on the carrier side, I'm focusing on the customer side, and then I'm focusing on the personal branding side. So maybe that's a better way to spin that. So maybe if you took 3 focused hours a day to focus on the customer, the carrier, and you, and then spend the rest of the 5 hours or 18 hours in logistics, kind of like how we work, putting out fires, because after 8 a.m. you're a first responder. So, and one thing is I'd get up early before the day starts and get all your personal time in, because as soon as 8 o'clock hits, you're just responding to people.
Perfect. So Gunnar, I want to thank you so much. This was so much fun. I'm so happy to have you on here. How can people get a hold of you if they want to hit you up? They want to see the podcast. They want to come see one of you defending that belt. Plug your stuff, brother.
Well, man, you can go over to Twitter and you can go to Instagram and Facebook and everything, but I really want you guys to focus on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can go to the CWG podcast, but the YouTube channel has changed and much easier to find. It's just Gunnar Miller. Go to Gunnar Miller and find it. If you go to the People's Captain YouTube, you've went too far and now you're on the rabbit hole of professional wrestling. Good luck to you. It'd be fun. But if you want to come watch me in professional wrestling, my next max is January 6th. It's in Canton, Georgia. It's me and the team of Southern Honor taking on the team of Dishonor. It's our bad guys who are trying to take over our company. They've been running it for months, but I finally got the belt from the baddest dude there, because I'm now the baddest dude there. And the People's Captain is going to bring a couple teammates, and we're going to take back our company. And we're going to 2023 with a good year. It's going to be a great year for wrestling, a great year for sales, a great year for logistics, and a great year for podcasting and branding.
Thank you so much, brother. So we want to thank everybody coming out this morning. We'll hit the replay back at 12 and 3 p.m. Eastern time on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Tomorrow is going to be Data Day with Dean, as we kind of look at what's going to be happening for the next week in logistics. It's going to be a banger episode. But once again, thank you to our sponsor, Daman at Centurion Trucking. He actually is looking for agents across North America and paying up to 60% off to the agents there. So, Jeff, always a pleasure, brother. Gunnar.
Same here, man.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
You guys do such a great job, man. Such a great job with your show. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
We'll talk soon, Gunnar. Thanks, buddy.
Yep. See you, brother.